There is a story in the Old Testament that, to be honest, I consider one of the most disturbing in the entire Bible. This narrative, found in chapters 19 to 21 of the book of Judges, contains elements that may be considered inappropriate for minors and potentially traumatic for some readers. Before we proceed, it is important to be aware of the sensitive nature of this content. Many people are only familiar with chapter 19, but the full story extends through chapter 21. I believe there are several important lessons we can draw from this deeply unsettling narrative. Let's explore the story and then reflect on its implications. The story begins in the days when there was no king in Israel. A Levite living in a remote area of the hill country of Ephraim took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. It is important to understand that this man, a Levite from northern Israel, established a relationship with this woman from the south in Bethlehem. However, the relationship between them was not stable. The woman was unfaithful to the Levite and left him, returning to her father's house in Bethlehem in Judah, where she stayed for 4 months. The Levite, wishing to reconcile with her, traveled from northern Israel to Bethlehem to bring her back. Upon arriving, the woman's father received him with great hospitality, repeatedly insisting that he stay longer. This delay would have significant consequences for the events that followed. Finally, after several days, the Levite insisted on leaving with his concubine and his servant. They left late in the day, a decision that would prove disastrous. By nightfall, they approached the city of Gibeah, in the territory of the tribe of Benjamin. At that time, travelers relied heavily on local hospitality. The group waited in the town square, hoping someone would invite them to stay the night. To their surprise, no one offered them shelter, a serious violation of the hospitality customs of the time. At last, an old man, himself a foreigner in Gibeah, offered them shelter in his home. This act of kindness, however, would be the prelude to a terrible tragedy. As the travelers settled in for the night, a group of wicked men from the city surrounded the house. They demanded that the old man hand over the Levite so they could sexually abuse him. The host, following a twisted logic that valued the life of his male guest over the women, offered his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead. In an act of cowardice and self-preservation, the Levite handed over his concubine to the mob. What followed was a night of unimaginable brutality. The men of Gibeah abused the woman until dawn, when they finally let her go. The woman, beaten and broken, managed to crawl back to the house where her master was staying. She collapsed at the threshold of the door, her hands reaching out for the safety that had been cruelly denied her. When the Levite awoke and found his concubine lying at the door, his reaction was one of cruel indifference. "Get up," he said. "Let's go." But she did not respond, for she was dead. The Levite's subsequent actions were as shocking as they were calculated. He took his concubine's body home and, in a grotesque act, cut it into 12 pieces. He then sent one piece to each of the 12 tribes of Israel, along with a report of the crime committed in Gibeah. This macabre message had the intended effect. All of Israel was outraged. The tribal leaders gathered and demanded an explanation from the tribe of Benjamin, in whose territory this atrocity had occurred. The Benjamites, instead of surrendering the guilty men of Gibeah, chose to defend them. This decision would prove catastrophic for the tribe. The other 11 tribes of Israel united against Benjamin, determined to punish not only the criminals, but the entire tribe for harboring them. What followed was a brutal civil war. The Benjamites, known for their martial prowess, initially inflicted heavy losses on the other tribes. However, after seeking divine guidance, the united tribes eventually prevailed. The consequences were devastating. Almost the entire tribe of Benjamin was exterminated. with only 600 men surviving by fleeing to the wilderness. The victorious tribes, in their zeal, had sworn not to give their daughters in marriage to any Benjamite. As the dust of battle settled, the Israelites faced an unexpected dilemma. In their fury, they had nearly eradicated one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The potential loss of Benjamin would have been seen as a national tragedy, disrupting God's divine plan for the 12 tribes. Remorse set in, but the Israelites were bound by their vow not to give their daughters to the Benjamites. They sought a solution that would allow the tribe of Benjamin to survive without directly breaking their oath. First, they attacked the city of Jabesh Gilead, which had not participated in the battle against Benjamin. They killed all the inhabitants except 400 young women, whom they gave as wives to the surviving Benjamites. However, this still left 200 Benjamite men without wives. In a morally questionable decision, the Israelites advised these men to hide in the vineyards during a festival in Shiloh and abduct the young women who came out to dance. This plan was carried out, providing wives for the remaining Benjamites and ensuring the survival of the tribe. This disturbing narrative serves as a cautionary tale, rich with lessons for both its original audience and modern readers. First, the dangers of moral relativism. The repeated phrase, "In those days there was no king in Israel, everyone did what was right in his own eyes," underscores the dangers of a society without moral anchors or legitimate authority. Second, the escalation of evil. What began as a domestic dispute escalated into a tribal genocide. This demonstrates how unchecked sin can have far-reaching and devastating consequences. Third, the value of human life. The treatment of the concubine, the host's daughter, and the women of Jabesh Gilead and Shiloh highlights a deeply problematic view of women as property rather than bearers of God's image. Fourth, the danger of rash vows. The Israelites' oath not to give their daughters to the Benjamites led to more violence and moral compromise. This serves as a warning against making absolute and hasty declarations. Fifth, the complexity of justice and mercy. The Israelites' attempt to punish evil while also preserving the tribe of Benjamin illustrates the difficult balance between justice and mercy. This story reminds us that every decision we make has consequences, often unpredictable and far-reaching. While God was merciful in allowing the tribe of Benjamin to rebuild and not be wiped out, there were severe consequences for their actions. The final verse of the book of Judges summarizes the entire narrative well. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This phrase challenges us to reflect on our own lives and societies. The further we stray from solid moral principles, the more vulnerable we become to committing acts we never imagined ourselves capable of. The story warns us of the dangers of moral relativism and the lack of accountability. Finally, this narrative reminds us of the importance of treating every human being as a bearer of God's image, regardless of gender or social status. It challenges us to consider how our actions affect others and to pursue justice and compassion in all our interactions. May we learn from the mistakes of the past and strive to create a more just and compassionate society, where the value of every human life is recognized and respected. This ancient story, disturbing as it may be, offers valuable insights for our modern society. Let's explore some practical applications of the lessons we've learned. First lesson, the importance of personal responsibility. In a world where we often seek to blame others for our problems, this narrative reminds us of the importance of personal responsibility. The Levite, the host in Gibeah, and even the tribes of Israel, in their excessive reaction, all made decisions that had devastating consequences. In our daily lives, we are constantly confronted with choices. Each decision, no matter how small it seems, has the potential to impact not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. We must ask ourselves, am I considering the possible consequences of my actions? Am I acting responsibly and ethically? Second lesson, the danger of group mentality. The reaction of the men of Gibeah and the subsequent defense of them by the tribe of Benjamin illustrate the dangers of group mentality. In our age of political and social polarization, it is crucial to maintain our ability to think critically and question the actions of our own group. This applies to all aspects of our lives: politics, religion, work, and even in our personal relationships. We must strive to maintain a balanced perspective and be willing to recognize when our group is wrong. Third lesson, the need to protect the vulnerable. The treatment of women in this story is particularly shocking to modern readers. Although we have made significant progress in terms of gender equality, this narrative serves as a powerful reminder that much work remains to be done. In our communities, we must be attentive to the needs of the most vulnerable. This includes not only women, but also children, the elderly, minorities, and any group that may be marginalized. How can we use our influence and resources to protect and empower those who are often ignored or mistreated by society? Fourth lesson, the value of restorative justice. The initial reaction of the tribes of Israel to the crime in Gibeah was violent retribution. However, their subsequent actions to preserve the tribe of Benjamin show a belated recognition of the importance of restoration. In our justice system and in our personal interactions, we must seek a balance between the need for accountability and the ultimate goal of restoration and reconciliation. How can we address wrongdoing in our society in a way that seeks not only to punish, but also to restore and rehabilitate? And finally, the fifth lesson, the wisdom of seeking counsel. An often overlooked aspect of this story is that, at several points, the Israelites consulted God before acting. Although their interpretations were not always correct, this highlights the importance of seeking wisdom beyond ourselves. In our daily lives, we face complex decisions that can have far-reaching consequences. It is crucial that we seek wise counsel, whether from trusted mentors, professionals, or for those of faith, through prayer and spiritual reflection. The humility to recognize that we do not have all the answers can save us from many mistakes. As we conclude our analysis of this challenging narrative, it is important to recognize that there are no easy answers to many of the questions it raises. The complexity of the human condition, with all its capacity for good and evil, is fully displayed in these chapters. However, perhaps the greatest value of this story lies precisely in its ability to unsettle us and make us question. It challenges us to examine our own lives and societies with a critical eye. Where are we failing to protect the vulnerable? Where are we allowing injustice to thrive? Where are we placing tribal loyalties above moral principles? At the same time, the narrative offers us hope. Even after acts of terrible brutality and injustice, we see a nation struggling to reconcile and rebuild. This reminds us that no matter how grave our mistakes, there is always the possibility of repentance, restoration, and a new beginning. As individuals and as a society, we are called to learn from the mistakes of the past. We are challenged to create communities where justice and compassion go hand in hand, where every person is valued as a bearer of the divine image, and where we constantly seek to do what is right, not in our own eyes, but according to higher moral principles. May the reading of this ancient story not be merely an academic exercise, but a catalyst for personal reflection and positive action in our own lives and communities. May we learn from the mistakes of the past to build a more just, compassionate, and ethical future for all.